Today I'm going to be reading Harry Potter the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling, Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley on number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in any strange or mysterious. Because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck. Although he did have a very large moustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbours. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret. And their greatest fear was that someone would discover it. They didn't think that they could bear it if anyone had found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Miss Dursley's sister. But they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't even have a sister because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were un-Dursley as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbours would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew the Potters had small money too, but they never had ever seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Miss and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull grey Tuesday our story starts, there was nothing but about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Miss Dursley gossiped happily as she wrestled a screaming Dudley into a high chair. At 12:30, none of them noticed a large tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, pecked Miss Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal towards little Tyke, chortled Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of number 4 drive. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar. A cat reading a map. For happened, Mr. Dursley didn't realise what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around to look again. There was a tubby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. Also, in this paragraph, the cat is Professor McGonagall. She just transformed into a cat. Mr. Dursley... No, I did that. It stared back. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No! Looking at the sign, cats couldn't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove towards town, he thought of nothing except a large order of drawers he's hoping to get that day. But on the edge of the town, drawers were driven out of his mind by something else. He couldn't help noticing that there seemed to be quite a lot of strangely dressed people about, people in cloaks. Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes. The get-ups used to fool young people. He supposed this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and his eyes fell on a huddle of these weirdos standing quite close by. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why? The man had to be older than he was and wearing an emerald green cloak. Nerve of him. But then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later, Mr. Dursley arrived in the Runnings car park, his mind back on drawers. Mr. Dursley always sat with his back to the window in his office on the 9th floor. If he hadn't, he might have found it harder to concentrate on drawers that morning. He didn't see the owls whooping past in broad daylight, though people down in the street did. They pointed and gazed open-mouthed as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl even at night. Mr. Dursley, however, had a perfectly normal owl-free morning. He yelled at 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls and chatted a bit more. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime, when he thought he'd stretch his legs and walk across the road to buy himself a bun from the baker's opposite. He had forgotten all about the people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the baker's. He eyed them angrily as he passed. They didn't know why, but they made him uneasy. This lot was whispering excitedly too, and he couldn't see a single collecting tin. It was on his way back past, clutching a large donut in a bag, and then he caught a few sips of what they were saying. What they were saying. The Potters. That's my word. Yes, there's Harry. Also, Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Fear flooded him. He looked back at the whispers as if he wanted to say something to them, but thought better of it. He dashed back across the road, hurried up to his office, snapped at his security not to disturb him, seized his telephone and almost finished dialing his phone number when he changed his mind. He put the receiver back down and stroked his moustache, thinking, no, he was being stupid. Potter wasn't such an unusual name. He was sure there were lots of people called Potter who had a son called Harry. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He never seen the boy. It might have been Harvey or Harold. There's no point in worrying Mrs. Dursley. She always got so upset at any mention of her sister. He didn't blame her if he'd had a sister like that. But all the same, with people in cloaks, he found it a lot harder to concentrate on drills that afternoon. And when he left the building at 5 o'clock, he was still so worried that he walked straight into someone just outside the door. Sorry. Pointed as a tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. He didn't seem it was a few seconds before Mr. Dursley realised that the man was wearing a violet cloak. He didn't seem at all upset about being almost knocked to the ground. On the contrary, his face split into a wide smile, and he said in a squeaky voice that made passers-by stare, "Don't be worried. Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing has upset me today." Like blah blah blah, and then rejoice, for you know who has gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating this happy day. And the old man hugged Mr. Dursley around the middle and walked off. Mr. Dursley was rooted to the spot. He had been hugged. He had been hugged in the middle like this. That whatever. He had been hugged by a complete stranger. He also thought he had been called a muggle, or whatever it was. He was rattled. He hurried to his car and set off home, hoping he was imagining things which he had never heard before, because he didn't approve of imagination. Just something completely area. Next page. As he pulled into the driveway of number 4, the first thing he saw and didn't improve his mood was the tabby cat he'd spotted that morning. It was now sitting on his garden wall. He was sure it was the same one. It had the same markings around its eyes. The cat with its eyes. Shoo! Shoo! Said Mr. Dursley loudly. The cat didn't move. It just gave him a stern look. Was this normal cat behaviour? Mr. Dursley wondered. Trying to put himself together, he let himself into the house. He was still determined not to mention anything to his wife. Mrs. Dursley had a nice normal day. She told him over dinner all about Mrs. Next Door's problems with her daughter, and how Dudley how Dudley had learned a new word, shan't. Mr. Dursley tried to act normally. When Dudley had been put to bed, he went to the living room in time to catch the last report on the evening news. Finally, bird watchers everywhere have reported that the nation owl have been behaving very unusual. And although unusually today, although owls normally hunt at night and are hardly ever seen in daylight, there have been hundreds and hundreds of sightings of these birds flying in every direction since sunrise. Experts are unable to explain why the owls have suddenly changed their sleeping pattern. Most mysterious. And now over to Jim Macy Guffin. And now over to Jim McGuffin. With the weather. Going to be any more showers of owls tonight, Jim? Well, Ted, said the weatherman, I don't know about that, but it's not only the owls that have been acting oddly today. Viewers as far apart as Kent, Yorkshire and Dundee have been phoning in to tell me that instead of the rain I promised yesterday, that they've been having a downpour of shooting stars. I promised. Perhaps people have been celebrating Bonfire Night early, but it's not until next week, folks. But I can promise a wet night tonight. Mr. Dursley sat frozen in his armchair. Shooting stars all over Britain are flying by daylight. Still, people in cloaks all over the place whisper about the Potters. Mrs. Dursley came into the living room carrying 2 cups of tea. It was no good. He had to say something. He cleared his throat nervously. Petunia. No, like this. He cleared his throat nervously. Petunia, dear, you haven't heard from your sister lately, have you? As he had expected, Mrs. Dursley looked shocked and angry. After all, they normally pretended she didn't have a sister. No, he said sharply. Why? Funny stuff on the news, Mr. Dursley mumbled. Owls, shooting stars, and there were a lot of funny looking people in town today. So, snapped Mrs. Dursley. Well, I just thought maybe it was something to do with, her lot. Miss Dursley flipped her teeth through past lips. Mr. Dursley wondered where he dared tell her he'd heard the name Potter. He decided he didn't dare. Instead, as casually as he could, the son hid about Dudley's age now, wouldn't he? What's his name again? What's his name again? Howard, isn't it? Harry. Nasty name, if you ask me. Oh yes, said Mr. Dursley, his heart sinking wobbly. Yes, I quite agree. He didn't say another word on the subject as they went upstairs to bed. While Mrs. Dursley was in the bathroom, Mr. Dursley crept to the bedroom window and peered down into the front garden. The cat was still there, staring down Privet Drive as though it was waiting for something. Was he imagining things? Could all this have anything to do with the Potters? If it got out that they were related to a pair of dogs, didn't think he could bear it. The Dursleys got into bed. Mrs. Dursley fell asleep quickly, but Mr. Dursley lay awake, turning it all over in his mind. His last comforting thought he fell asleep was that even if the Potters were involved, there's no reason for them to come near him. And Petunia him and Mrs. Dursley. The Potters knew very well what he and Petunia thought about them and their kind. He couldn't see how he and Petunia could get mixed up in anything that might be going on. Yawn and turned over. It couldn't affect him. How very wrong he was. Mr. Dursley might have been drifting into uneasy sleep, but the cat on the wall was showing no sign of sleepiness. It was sitting as still as a statue. Its eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far corner of Privet Drive. Nor when 2 hours swooped overhead. In fact, it was nearly midnight before the cat had moved at all. A man appeared on the corner the cat had been watching. Appeared so sudden. Appeared so suddenly and silently that you'd have thought he just popped out of the ground. The cat's tail twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man had ever been seen in Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and old. And very old, judging by the silver in his hair. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak which swept the ground, and high-heeled buckled boots. His blue eyes were light brown and sparkling behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realise that he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots were unwelcome. Where everything from his name to his boots were unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloak, looking as though he's looking for something. But he didn't seem to realise he was being watched, because he suddenly looked up at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He found that what he was looking for in his inside pocket. He flicked it open, held it up in the air and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out of a little pop. He clicked it again. The next lamp flickered out of the darkness. 12 times he clicked it. 12 times he clicked the put outer until the only lights in the whole street were 2 tiny pink pricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching him. If anyone looked out of the window now, it would be the eyed Mrs. Dursley. They wouldn't even be able to see anything down on the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the put outer back inside his cloak and set off down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't even look at it, but after a moment he spoke to it. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." McGonagall. He turned to smile at the tabby, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses, exactly the shape of markings the cat had around its eyes. She too was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her hair was drawn back into a tight bun. She looked distantly ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "You'd be stiff. My dear Professor, I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly. You'd be stiff if you'd been sitting on a brick wall all day," said Professor McGonagall. "All day, when you could have been celebrating. I mustn't have passed a few dozen feasts and parties on my way here." Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. "Oh yes, everyone's celebrating all right," she said impatiently. "You'd think they'd be a bit more careful, but no, even the muggles had noticed something had been going on. It was on the news." She jerked her head back at the Dursleys' dark living room window and heard it for owls, shooting stars. While they're not completely stupid, they were bound to notice something. Shooting star sound down in Kent. I bet that was Deadless Diggle. He never had much sense. We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. "I know that," said Professor McGonagall irritably. "But that's no reason to lose our heads." People are being downright careless, out on the streets in broad daylight, and not even dressed in monk clothes, swapping rumours. She threw a sharp sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though he was going to tell her something, but he didn't, so she went on. "A fine thing it would be if on the very day he has really gone. A fine thing it would be if on the day you know who seems to have disappeared at last, the muggles find out all about us. Then you know who. On the very day the muggles found out about us all." "I suppose he really has gone, Dumbledore." It certainly seems so. There's much to be thankful for. Would you care for sherbet lemon?" Would you care for a sherbet lemon?" A what? A sherbet lemon. They're a type of mango sweet I'm rather fond of. No, thank you very much, said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think this was the moment for sherbet lemons. As I say, even if you know who has actually won. My dear Professor, surely a sensible person like you can call him by his name. I have been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name. Voldemort. Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore was unflicking to sherbet and did seem not to notice. It gets also confusing if we say you know who. I have never seen any reason to be frightened. Of saying Voldemort's name. I know you haven't sounded half exasperated, half admiring, but you're different. Everyone you know is the only one you know who is afraid of. Only you flatter me, said Dumbledore calmly. Voldemort had powers I will never have. Only because you're too well noble to use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed, and this is the really funny part I quite like. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed so much since Madame Pomfrey told me she liked her new earmuffs. That's the funny part. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, "The owls are nothing to be rumours that flying around. You know that everyone. You know what everyone's saying about why he's disappeared. About what finally stopped him. It seemed that Professor McGonagall reached the point that she was most anxious to discuss. She had been waiting on a cold hard wall all day for neither as a cat nor as a woman, as had she put Dumbledore such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain, whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe it until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was true. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another shot lemon and did not answer what they're saying. They pressed his large Voldemort hand in Godric's hollow. He went to find the Potters. The rumours is that Harry that Harry is that the rumor is that Lily and James Potter are that they're dead. Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. Lily and James. I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it. Oh, Albus. He reached out and patted her on the shoulder, not on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as she went on, but that's not all. They're saying he tried to kill the Potter's son, Harry, but he couldn't kill that little boy. No one knows why or how. That's why he's gone. Dumbledore nodded glumly. It's true. I mean, no, it's true, faltered Professor McGonagall. After he's done all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy. Just the starting of all the things to stop him. But how? In the name of heaven did Harry survive? Can only guess, said Dumbledore. We may never know. Professor McGonagall poured out a lace handkerchief and dabbed her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he took a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands, but no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the edge. It must have made sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, Hagrid's late. I suppose it was he who told you I'd meet here, by the way. Yes, said Professor McGonagall. And I don't suppose you're going to tell me why here of all the places. I can't bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now. You can't mean the people who live here, cried Professor McGonagall, jumping to her feet and pointing at number 4. Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching them all day. I can't find 2 people who are less like us. They've got this son. I saw him kicking his mother all the way up to the street, screaming for sweets. Harry Potter, come and live here. Harry Potter, come and live here. It's the best place for him, said Dumbledore firmly. His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter. A letter, repeated McGonagall faintly, sitting back down on the wall. Really, Dumbledore, you think you can explain all this in a letter? These people will never be surprised if it'll be famous in legend. I wouldn't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There'll be books written about Harry. Every child in the whole in our world will know his name. Exactly. Dumbledore looking very seriously over top of his armor's glasses. It would be enough to turn any boy's head. Famous before he can walk and talk. Famous for better of he will be going up away from board that till he's ready to take it. Professor McGonagall opened his mouth and changed her mind, swallowed, and then said, Yes, you're right, of course. But how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore? She eyed his cloak suddenly as though he might be hiding Harry underneath it. Hagrid's bringing him. You think it wise to trust Hagrid with something as important as this? I would trust Hagrid with my life. Dumbledore, I'm not saying his heart isn't in the right place, said Professor McGonagall grudgingly. You can't pretend he's not careless. He does tend to. What was that? A slow rumbling sound had broken the silence around them. It grew steadily louder as they looked up and down and a huge motorbike fell out of the air and landed on the road in front of them. If the motorbike was huge, it was nothing to the man sitting astride it. He almost looked twice as tall as a normal man and at least 5 times as wide. He looked simply too big to be allowed and so wild. Long tangles of bushy black hair and beard hid most of his face. He had hands the size of dustbin lids, and his feet in their leather boots were like baby dolphins. In his vast muscular arms, he was holding a bundle of blankets. Hagrid, said Dumbledore, sounding relief. At last, and where did you get that motorbike? Borrowed it, Professor Dumbledore, said the giant, climbing carefully off the motorbike as he spoke. Young Sirius Black lent it to me. I've got him, sir. No problems. Why there? No, sir. Sir. House was almost destroyed, but I got him out all right before the muggles started swarming around. He fell asleep as we were flying over Bristol. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall bent forward over the bundle of blankets. Just inside, just visible, was a baby boy fast asleep. Under a tuft of jet black hair over his forehead, they could see a curiously shaped cut like a bolt of lightning. Is that well? Whispered Professor McGonagall. Yes, said Dumbledore. He'll have that scar forever. Couldn't you do something about it, Dumbledore? scars can come in useful. I have one myself above my left knee, which is a perfect map of the London Underground. Well, give him here, Hagrid. We'd better get this over with. Dumbledore took Harry in his arms and turned towards Dursley's house. Could I say goodbye to him, sir? Said Hagrid. He bent his great shaggy head over Harry and gave him what must have been scratchy, whiskery kiss. Then suddenly Hagrid let out a howl like a wounded dog. Shh, hissed Professor McGonagall. You'll wake the muggles up. Sorry, Hagrid didn't add a large spotted handkerchief and burying it his face in it. But I can't stand it. Lily and James dead, and poor little Harry off to live with muggles. Yes, it's all very sad, but get a grip on yourself, Hagrid, or we'll be found. Professor McGonagall whispered, patting Hagrid gingerly on the arm as Dumbledore stepped over the large garden wall and walked to the door. He laid Harry gently on the doorstep, took a letter out of his cloak, tucked it inside Harry's blanket, and then came back to the other two. For a minute, the three of them stood and looked at the little bundle. Hagrid's shoulders shook. Professor McGonagall blinked furiously, and the twinkling light that usually shone from Dumbledore's eyes seemed to have gone out. Yeah, well, said Dumbledore finally, that's that. We have no choice. We've no business staying here. We may as well go and join the celebrations. Well, said Dumbledore finally, that's that. I mean, we said that before. Yeah, said Hagrid in a muffled voice. I'd better get this bike away. Good night, Professor McGonagall. Professor Dumbledore, sir. Wiping his streaming eyes on his jacket sleeve, Hagrid swung himself on the motorbike and off into the night. I shall see you soon, I expect, Professor McGonagall, said Dumbledore, nodding at her. Professor McGonagall blew her nose in reply. Dumbledore turned and walked back down the street. On the corner, he turned and stopped and took out the silver put outer. He clicked it once, and 12 balls of light sped back to their street lamps, so that Privet Drive glowed slightly orange, and he could make out a tabby cat slinking around the corner of the other end of the street. He could just see the bundle blankets and stuff of number 4. Good luck, Harry, he murmured. He turned on his heel and swish, and with a swish of his cloak, he was gone. A breeze ruffled the neat hedge of Privet Drive, which lay silent and tidy under the inky sky, the very last place you would expect astonishing things to happen. Harry Potter rolled over inside his blanket without waking up. One small hand closed on the letter beside him, and he slept on. Not knowing he was special, not knowing his things, not knowing if he would be woken in a few hours' time by Mrs. Dursley's scream. And she opened the front door to put out the milk bottles, nor that he would spend the next few weeks being pudded and pinched by his cousin Dudley. To Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass. Nearly 10 years had passed since the Dursleys